And I will tell my friend, and he is my friend from Texas, I'm prepared to work with him on a real jobs bill. This is a real jobs bill. But you and I both know it's a small bore jobs bill. That doesn't make it bad. Doesn't make it, can I have 10 additional seconds just to conclude my thought? It doesn't mean that we shouldn't pass it. I thank you for bringing it to the floor. But let us not delude America or deceive ourselves that this is the jobs bill that we need to be passing, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I yield myself 10 seconds simply to respond to my friend that we have tried the President's jobs bills, the stimulus, the health care package, Dodd-Frank, and yet we still have the highest duration of 8% plus unemployment since the Great Depression. Here's at least a bipartisan bill we can work on, and I look forward to that today. At this point, I will yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Capital Markets Subcommittee, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Garrett.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank the gentleman from Texas as well. I also rise to express support for the Jobs Act today. I strongly believe that the Jobs Act will ease the burden on capital formation, on the entrepreneurial growth companies that have traditionally served as U.S. economy's primary job creators, and will provide a larger pool of investors with access to information and investment options on these companies that currently doesn't exist. You know, with venture capital fundraising basically stagnant and the IPO market largely closed off, innovative startup companies who can have access to the capital market they need have been forced literally to delay research on promising medical and scientific and technological breakthroughs. And that has hurt our economy and our global competitiveness because emerging companies need capital. Developing medical cures to help people live longer and healthier and more productive lives needs capital. Developing technology to improve the speed of communications need capital. And developing alternative energy technologies to reduce our dependence on foreign sources requires capital. So with the passage of this bill, we'll provide those companies with innovative and creative activity in the marketplace is essential to keeping American companies competitive, with a cost-effective means to access that capital and keep this country at the forefront of medical, scientific, technological breakthroughs. You know, economic growth occurs when companies go public. So just recently I met with the New Jersey Technology Council, and they stressed the importance of removing the regulatory burdens of bringing companies that invest in the market. And the job bill, this does that. It restores that innovation for early-stage investors to provide the capital that American entrepreneurs need. And so we do this by chipping away at the albatross of regulations that has strangled and held back the IPO market since the passage of way back of the Sarbanes-Oxley law. This bill then provides American entrepreneurs with the access to the capital they need to basically go after and seek their dreams. It provides the venture capital investors with the exit strategy they need to help make those dreams a reality and creates a welcoming environment. And with that, I believe the Jobs Act is a common-sense bill, and I will support this legislation before us. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes, 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Connecticut is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I rise today very excited about what we are about to do on this floor. As has been said over the course of many hours, we are about to pass legislation that will be good for the core strength of this country, for our entrepreneurs, for our small banks that we trust to provide credit in our communities. This is a good bill. I'm sorry that it's been marred by a couple of things that have been the topic of much discussion today. I'm sorry that the Republican majority has used this debate as an opportunity to promote the canard, not my word, Bruce Bartlett's word, which I think means baloney, that the main problem with our economy today is regulation. Bruce Bartlett, conservative economist and former advisor to President Reagan, said, in my opinion, regulatory uncertainty is a canard invented by Republicans that allows them to use current economic problems to pursue an agenda supported by the business community year in and year out. We have an obligation to make sure that our regulation is good, that it keeps us safe, that it keeps our air clean, that it keeps our banks alive without quashing the entrepreneurship and economic vitality. We should do that every day. But what we have heard The ideology, this notion that regulation is the problem in our economy, is just what Bruce Bartlett called it, a canard. And I'm sorry that this bill has been spoiled by the antics of the Republican majority. I'm thrilled that this bill includes H.R. 1965. At the end of the day, I mentioned Reagan. Reagan said, "You'd get a lot done in Washington, D.C. if you didn't care who gets the credit." There may be only one way to spell potato, but there are a lot of ways to skin a cat. And if we're going to skin this cat this way, I'm okay with that. Because small banks need the flexibility to go public when they should go public. Because we should, for those companies who want to go public, provide them with some relief from the regulations that might be more appropriate for larger companies. All of these things, though we have passed many of these measures on the floor, are important. And so, marred though it has been by the antics of the Republican majority, this is fundamentally a bipartisan, good bill. And it is a rare step forward for this House of Representatives, something that I think will cause every American to say they can get something done. And for that, I'm grateful and urge the passage of this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Chair, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Hurt.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Chair, I rise today in support of the Bipartisan Jobs Act, and I thank Chairman Baucus for his leadership in putting the Financial Services Committee at the forefront of the effort to advance job-creating policies in this House. After recently touring Virginia's 5th District, I am freshly reminded that federal government overregulation continues to stand in the way of the lifeblood of our economy, our small family businesses, our Main Street banks, and our family farms. Across the 5th District, I regularly hear stories of how unnecessary regulations have served as a barrier to existing family business owners who wish to hire and expand their companies, and as a barrier to aspiring 5th District entrepreneurs that are discouraged from investing in new startups. Our committee has worked to offer solutions that would give citizens across this country the ability to harness the American dream by starting a new business, working to make that business successful, and working to create the jobs Americans desperately need. The Jobs Act represents a legislative package that has support from members of Congress on both sides of the aisle and from the President. This legislation collectively reduces burdens that prevent small businesses from accessing the capital necessary to hire and expand, and it encourages our entrepreneurs to get their startups off the ground. This legislation represents an opportunity for Congress and the President to work together to advance legislation for the good of the American people. Small family businesses and family farms are the backbone of our economy in Central and South Side Virginia, and as we work to grow our economy and spur job creation, it is critical that we adopt legislation like the Jobs Act to make it easier for them to succeed, not harder. We must act now to put the American people back to work and sustain the American dream for our children and our grandchildren. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I yield to myself 2 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much to the members of this House and to those who are listening to this debate. You've heard this described as a jobs bill. And in my earlier remarks, I too described this as a jobs bill. You've heard us talk about job creation, access to capital, ways by which we could support small businesses in general, but IPOs in particular. You heard us talk about crowdfunding and creative means and ways by which we can help to invigorate this economy. And so, certainly this is a jobs bill. But then you heard some reference to the President's job bill by our minority whip, Mr. Steny Hoyer, who talked about a comprehensive approach. Make no mistake, this jobs bill is important, and I certainly hope that it will help to stimulate the economy in ways that all of us thought that it could. However, when you take a look at this compared to the President's comprehensive legislation, then you understand what Mr. Steny Hoyer was talking about. Mr. Steny Hoyer was talking about the President's comprehensive jobs bill that would do some very important things. It talked about job sharing. It will make sure that our teachers and our firefighters are kept on the job. It talks about school construction. It talks about aid to community colleges and comprehensive efforts to provide tax credits for small businesses. So you see, we would like everybody to understand that we're not abandoning a comprehensive effort to do real job creation and access to capital and support for small businesses. We're trying to take every opportunity, every step. And as it has been mentioned time and time again, respectfully request 1 more minute.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 1 more minute.
In continuing the comparison between the two efforts, as it has been said over and over again today, we certainly have joined in a bipartisan fashion to move this bill, even though I am not sure, and some of our members are not sure, that everything that's in all of these bills is what we absolutely understand, and we're willing to say we know that it will help, that it will help to deal with this economy in ways that we want it to, but we're willing to take a chance. We're willing to try. Now, when you compare this with the President's comprehensive jobs bill, then you can see this is only one effort. And in comparison, it's a small effort in comparison to what the President has proposed. And so, let us not forget, we still have work to do. We still have to be concerned about the unacceptable high unemployment rates. As we speak today, the unemployment rate is still in excess of 8%. Gentlelady requests another additional 2 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized for an additional 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Unemployment.
At the end of that time, the gentlewoman will have 30 seconds remaining.
Gentlelady will include the 30 seconds in this 2-minute request.
The gentlewoman's recognized for 2.5 minutes.
So, Madam Chair, I would like for us all to recognize that we have taken a step that we are constantly accused of not being able to do, and that is move something in a bipartisan fashion. And I'm appreciative for my colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle who have been so cooperative, and I'm appreciative for the leadership that has been provided on this side of the aisle. But we still must remember that unemployment is unacceptably high. We must remember that we must have a comprehensive approach. We must remember that the President has presented us with a comprehensive, realistic approach by which we can stimulate this economy, create jobs, support education and our schools, and help the unemployed in ways that they are desperately waiting for. So with that, Madam Chair, I will yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Madam Chairman, at this time, I am happy to yield 2 minutes to the Vice Chairman of the Capital Markets Subcommittee, one of the prime authors of this bill, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And to my good friend from Texas, thank you also. I actually feel somewhat blessed being able to stand here today. I'm blessed because I have multiple pieces of legislation that are rolled into this job bill, as well as multiple amendments. So first, let me make sure I've said that my proper thank yous. I also want to make sure that the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, Spencer Bacchus, has my appreciation for allowing me to work on these over the last year. But I also need to reach across the aisle to Mr. Hines and many of the others who made me defend some of the ideas, who argued with me and helped me make these better pieces of legislation through the last year as we vetted the process. And I wanted to touch on 2 of the pieces of legislation that are in here and help folks understand why these are actually really important to capital formation for small businesses. The first one we refer to as H.R. 1070, Small Capital Formation Act. Many people will refer to it as Regulation A, Reg A. Well, in today's world, if you wanted to go public in this streamlined, simplified process, you could only go public with a capitalization of $5 million. Well, no one's going to the stock market for $5 million. This will raise it to 50. Why is 50 so important? 50 is the minimum threshold to be traded on the big exchanges, on the public exchanges. This allows an organization to find a path, a less expensive path, to become publicly traded and be publicly traded on those exchanges where it can be viewed and vetted and hopefully grow and grow jobs. The second bill I have in here that I'm very proud of is one that we realize that capital formation is changing in the world. And for many, 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 many years, if you were an organization, you got to 500 shareholders, you had to stop. Because at 501, you had to go to the SEC and do a public filing. Well, what if you were a high-tech company or a biotech company and you were giving shares, bits of ownership of the company, to your employees? This will remove those employees.
A minute.
The gentleman's recognized for an additional minute.
This will give those employees an exemption. So a company that's growing, that's actually in some ways, to use a term that's often used around here, spreading the wealth inside that organization, and encourage folks to vest their time and their talents in what are often speculative ventures as a company is growing. That lifts that cap, but it also raises it to 1,000 shareholders. There may be an amendment that will come to raise it to 2,000, and that is something I will support. The last thing here is also in committee we heard discussion last year of why should community banks, why should we raise their shareholder limit to 2,000? We actually had some community banks come to us and say, look, we've been around for many, 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 many years. We have legacy stockholders in the company. We're at that 500 share, but because of our long history, we can no longer raise the capital, the equity capital that's necessary. And that's why that concept is so important, raising that to 2,000 shareholders. Madam Chairman, I yield back my time. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, jobs and growing the economy is what our constituents care about. Again, we are unfortunately and regrettably in the midst of the slowest and weakest recovery in the post-war era. And in fact, many of my constituents, they don't feel the recovery. They don't see it. They still know many of their friends and neighbors and family members remain unemployed. And that's why the #1 priority of House Republicans have been to grow this economy and create more jobs. It's why House Republicans have a plan for America's job creators. Now, Madam Chair, it's very difficult to find common ground in this institution, as we all know. And regrettably, the vast majority of these bills are stacked up like cordwood in the United States Senate. They won't take them up. We tried many of the President's ideas. For 2 years, we tried every single one of his ideas. We tried the stimulus program, which helped stimulate the national debt to the level it has today. We tried the President's health care plan that we were told would help grow jobs in the economy. Dodd-Frank, where our financial institutions, the big get bigger, the small get smaller, the taxpayer gets poorer. We disagreed with those policies. And so we have tried to find common ground. We heard the distinguished minority whip lament that the bill didn't do more. This is the common ground we can find with our friends on the other side of the aisle. It's important. It's not as important as repealing the President's health care program, which is absolutely strangling our small businesses. It's not as important as turning back so much of the red tape that impacts every single small business in America by enacting the REINS Act to ensure that Congress, not the unelected bureaucracy, controls whether or not we impose job-killing regulations on our small business enterprises. But it's still an important bill nonetheless. It's a bill that will allow these emerging growth companies, again, perhaps the Googles of tomorrow, the the apples of tomorrow, to be able to access vital equity capital. And so it's an important piece of legislation. I wish it did more. I wish my friends from the other side of the aisle would acknowledge that we have tried many of their partisan ideas, and they haven't worked. But here's at least a bipartisan idea where we have worked with the President. We have his support right here, Madam Chair, where the President of the United States supports this legislation. And so I'm happy that at least one portion of the House Republican plan for America's job creators stands a very good chance of being turned into law, and that the American people will see that we continue to work to find that common ground. And so I'm happy again to be able to encourage my colleagues to support this today. I look forward to the day that the President can sign this into law. And at this time, Madam Chair, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Hensling, for his leadership on the Financial Services Committee, and I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Fincher, for offering the legislation before us today. The American people understand that entrepreneurship is at a record low. It's actually at a 17-year low in the United States. We know that small businesses create the majority of new jobs in our country and has done so for generations. We also know that we have record unemployment. We have 8% unemployment for a record 36 months at that very high level. It's unacceptable. We have to do something. Now, we cannot fix everything in one piece of legislation. This idea that you can have just simply a large bill that fixes all the problems in the world simply is not in accordance with American history or what the American people want and desire. But we also know, and the American people understand, especially small business folks and entrepreneurs understand, that red tape gets in the way of job creation. We saw with the Dodd-Frank Act that it restricts lending and makes it more costly to get lending. If you talk to small business folks, that's their one biggest complaint, is a restriction on access to capital. That's on the debt side. We also see that we have regulations and laws written in 1933 and 1934, in an era when the telephone was the new technology of the day. We need to update those regulations. That is at the heart of what this Jobs Act does. It doesn't simply say about debt fundraising. It says on the equity side that you can go around the red tape and actually allow the average everyday investor access to the capital markets and the new great ideas of the future. This is what the legislation is about. I urge my colleagues to vote for it, and I ask my colleagues to move forward on this, especially in the Senate. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire how much time I have remaining?
The gentleman from Texas has exactly 1 minute remaining.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to yield exactly that 1 minute to the prime author of the Jobs Act, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fincher.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding. I stand today heartbroken that something that we've meant for good here, myself and my colleague, Mr. Carney, a Jobs Act would be tied up in some heated rhetoric. And I want to urge to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that jobs aren't Democrat or Republican. They're American. And people are begging for Congress to get out of the way and let the private sector get back in the business of creating jobs. And that's what we're doing with this jobs bill that we're pushing through. So hopefully, we can get beyond some feelings, hurt feelings maybe, and let's focus back on the reason why we were sent up here, and that's to put the people back in the power and not Washington. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields back. All time has expired. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. In lieu of the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the bill, an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of the Rules Committee, print 112-17, is adopted, and the bill, as amended, shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of further amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered as read. No further amendment to the bill as amended shall be in order except those printed in House Report 112-409. Each such further amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 1, printed in House Report 112-409. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have the amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 1, printed in House Report Number 112-409, offered by Mr. Fincher of Tennessee.
Pursuant to House Resolution 572, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fincher, and a member opposed, each shall control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today along with the gentleman from Delaware, Mr. Carney, to offer a technical amendment to H.R. 3606. The amendment now pending would simply provide technical corrections to the underlying bill. Both members and committee staff have heard from various groups and stakeholders affected by this bill. The amendment is a reflection of the technical advice given to us by these groups. I strongly believe that these technical changes to improve the bill, and would ask my colleagues to support this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Do any members seek time in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to claim the time in opposition to the amendment, although I'm not opposed to the amendment.
Without objection.
I
Gentleman's recognized.
Wish to urge, I want to commend again the gentleman from Tennessee, the gentleman from Delaware for this amendment that I believe helps improve the underlying amendment with some technical corrections. I would urge all members to adopt it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield my colleague, Mr. Carney from Delaware, some time.
Thank you, Mr. Fincher. Being new at this,
how much time does the gentleman yield?
How much time? A minute.
1 minute. Gentleman's recognized for a minute.
Being new at this, I think I was supposed to grab that time in opposition, but I don't oppose this amendment. So I stumbled there for a minute, then I just rise in support of the technical amendment that is under consideration at this time, and also say that we've had, in the work through the committee, we also had a technical amendment that was adopted by the committee that addressed a number of the concerns that were raised by Ranking Member Frank and by my good friend from Ohio, Mr. Renacci, consistent with this amendment that's under consideration right now. This is the spirit in which we've worked this bill, trying to address concerns that were raised both by interested parties as well as by individual members, and so I rise in support of the amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Tennessee.
Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Time. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 112-409. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of my amendment to Jumpstart our Business Startups Act and would like to speak on the same.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report Number 112-409, offered by Mr. McIntyre of North Carolina.
Pursuant to House Resolution 572, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McIntyre, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This important amendment adjusts the emerging growth company definition for inflation, resulting in providing more flexibility for businesses. The emerging growth company definition would ensure that our small businesses and startups thrive in our nation's challenging economy and continue to create jobs that are so important to our citizens. Similar to other parts of the bill, the amount related to regulation flexibility will be adjusted for inflation to take into account increased costs that small companies are currently facing. This will allow for more businesses to be able to enjoy the regulation flexibility and help them start up and grow. Mr. Speaker, our economy continues to struggle, and many Americans are struggling with dwindling family finances, while too many are facing joblessness. And no one knows better than that our true job creators across the nation need to be able to have relief from burdensome regulations. The small businesses and companies that are being hit hard by these regulations need relief. It is imperative that we all work together to reduce regulations, to get rid of these onerous regulations on our small businesses and help them continue to create jobs and persevere. My amendment, which the Congressional Budget Office has scored as having no cost to the federal government, reflects the needs and priorities of those small businesses and entrepreneurs across the nation. By passing it today, we all together can truly make a difference for American families and businesses. Let's work together to rebuild our economy and put Americans back to work. And with that, I yield 1 minute to Mr. Sarbanes of Maryland.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually rise with some significant concerns about the IPO on-ramp provisions of this bill. I'm concerned because there already is exempted from the Sarbanes-Oxley compliance requirements about 60% of the IPOs that we see, and this would extend the period in which companies have the requirement of complying with Sarbanes-Oxley to 5 years for companies that exceed that $75 million and go up to $1 billion in revenues. My concern about that is that's a period of time in which a lot of mischief can be done when it comes to financial fraud, and I think it exposes investors to significant potential damage. And my hope would have been that this could have been remedied along the way. Because of my concerns about it, I'm going to be compelled to vote against the bill because I think it really has the effect of gutting significant investor protections. I thank you for the time, and I yield back.
Sitting member claim time in opposition. Gentleman from Texas.
Yeah, I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to claim the time in opposition, although I'm not opposed to the amendment.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized. Controlling the 5 minutes.
Yeah, I would like to encourage the House to support the amendment from the gentleman from North Carolina. I believe it to be very straightforward, very simple, very common sense to imply to ensure that there is an inflation adjustment that is applied to the underlying bill. I think that is helpful. I urge again all members to adopt. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from North Carolina.
I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields back. All time having been yielded back, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report 112-409. For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report Number 112-409, offered by Mr. Himes of Connecticut.
Pursuant to House Resolution 572, the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Connecticut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Chair, my amendment is very simple. This bill that we are discussing today creates what we have come to describe as the IPO on-ramp, which for emerging growth companies would lift some of the more burdensome requirements that are perhaps more appropriate for larger, more established companies. Now, the question naturally arises, how should we define an emerging growth company? Currently, the bill specifies that a company with revenues at or in excess of $1 billion would not qualify, meaning revenues less than that, and you could qualify to be an emerging growth company. My amendment, Mr. Chairman, and my belief is that this is far too expansive a definition of emerging growth companies. It's not just my belief. We heard in the hearing on which we held on this bill from Mr. LeBlanc that something more like 250 to 500 million in revenues would be appropriate. I offered in committee the notion similar to this amendment that we make the cap 750 million in revenues. The Council of Institutional Investors has sent a letter to our leadership expressing the same concern about the billion-dollar revenue number. And I would just read from that letter and quote, "We note that some of the most knowledgeable and active advocates for small business capital formation," let me repeat that, "some of the most knowledgeable and active advocates for small business capital formation have in the past agreed that a company with more than $250 million of public float generally has the resources and infrastructure to comply with existing U.S. security regulations." It's hard to know $1 billion in revenue is an abstraction. Let me give you an example. I have a list of the IPOs that have occurred in the last couple of years. Currently, what I think of as a fine company, Spirit Airlines, with some $800 million in revenues, would qualify as an emerging growth company. They went public in May of 2011. Spirit Airlines is an established airline with 2,400 employees. They clearly are a company that has the capability to comply with the full array of protections that are there for investors and others. And I would note that the letter that I read from, of course, is from the association that is there to advocate on behalf of our investors. So, Mr. Chairman, my amendment is common sense. It's supported by the hearing that we had. It's supported by the Council of Institutional Investors. It is common sense, dare I use that phrase, and therefore would urge adoption so that we get this definition right. It's a great bill. It is good that we are making it easier for small and emerging companies to go public and to not bear the full burden of the protections that are out there, but we should get this definition right. We should make sure that this is a benefit that accrues to truly small, entrepreneurial, emerging companies, and therefore I think $750 million in revenue is a more appropriate benchmark, and therefore I propose this amendment. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves some unclaimed time in opposition. Gentleman from Texas.
I claim the time in opposition, Mr.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume. Mr. Chairman, again, the people of America care about jobs. They care about economic growth. Although we've had some recent improvement in our monthly unemployment figures, when we add in those who are working part-time, who would prefer to be working full-time, when we add in those who frankly have just given up and left the labor force, we know that the true unemployment rate in America is closer to 15.3%. And we know that the job engine of America is small business. And every big business had to start out as a small business. And I respect the gentleman's contribution to the bill. And this is about line drawing. I understand that. I respect his opinions. I know from the professional background from which he has come. But I feel like his amendment would take this bill in the complete opposite direction of where we need to take this policy for emerging growth companies. He used the example of Spirit Airlines. I don't have the figure at my fingertips, but I believe their market cap was in excess of what is provided for in the underlying bill. So I believe, again, they would not have qualified for the exemption in the first place. But we want to provide this on-ramp for emerging growth companies so, again, we can find tomorrow's Googles, we can find tomorrow's Apples. And yes, this is drawing some lines in the sand, but it's clearly not a line that seems to be of great concern to the President. We all know that the White House issues statement of administration policy, and when they have concerns about provisions in a piece of legislation, they have never been shy or reticent to share that with us. And as I read the statement of administration policy, the President doesn't seem to have a problem with where that line has been drawn. I would also point out that the companion legislation on the Senate side, S-1933, introduced by Senator Schumer of New York, Democrat Senator Schumer of New York, also has a gross revenue test of $1 billion. And so it appears that the President supports this, Senator Schumer supports this. This is bipartisan support for this $1 billion figure. And I think at this particular time in our nation's history, the American people demand we err on the side of creating jobs and economic growth. And so again, I respect the gentleman for his amendment, but I would urge that it be rejected, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Connecticut.
Mr. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. I believe the gentleman from Connecticut has made the salient points, but I do want to point out that this radical amendment, under current law and current regulation, approximately 60% of all businesses are already exempt. They're exempted pursuant to a law that we passed in 2003, Sarbanes-Oxley, which was a bipartisan bill. Sarbanes-Oxley, bipartisan. All this radical amendment does is simply say that we're all going up from 60% to allow 80% of the businesses to be exempted from these provisions. Now, I don't think that's radical by any definition. I think that's reasonable, and even the truth is I have some hesitancies even at these numbers, but I do believe that it's worth trying because it's worth taking a shot to see if some relief will help. At the same time, it is not a wise provision to take a complete step backwards to say to investors that you're going to go in blind, you're going to be exempted from audits. This bill doesn't do that. I don't think that's the attempt. That's around 30 seconds.
An additional 30 seconds to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
I don't think that's the attempt. I actually think this bill has an underlying good purpose, and I'd like to be able to support it. But I think that the bill goes too far, particularly in this provision. By going from 60% to 80% in one fell swoop, I think the risks are too high, having gone through the problems of the early 2000s, the problems of 2008, and the potential problems that are lurking there every single day. A little extra transparency on behalf of investors is not a bad thing when we're only talking a handful of the largest corporations in the country. Thank you.
Gentleman from Texas.
I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Texas has 2 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Connecticut's time has expired.
The time of the gentleman has expired from Connecticut. In that case, Mr. Chairman, I will yield the remainder of the time to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fincher.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we want to be clear, this bill is about new companies, not existing companies, but about new companies that are wanting to go public. The $1 billion revenue and $700 million in public float thresholds for emerging growth companies in the underlying bill were recommended by the nonpartisan IPO task force, comprised of industry experts such as venture capitalists, public investors, entrepreneurs, investment bankers, accountants, professors, securities attorneys, and exchanges. If we strike the public float requirements, we break this provision's ties to an already defined SEC threshold. $700 million in public float is the threshold for a company to be considered a large accelerated filer under SEC rules. This number is used by the SEC to define a mature company, meaning that the company will be able to handle complying with a variety of SEC regulations on day one of its IPO. The $1 billion revenue threshold in the bill serves as a backstop to the SEC's definition of an accelerated filer. In addition, lowering the revenue thresholds would increase IPO costs for more companies and make the IPO path less attractive than merger and acquisition transactions. More mergers and less IPOs would mean less job creation here at home as a result of innovative companies being absorbed by larger purchasers, including non-U.S. companies. Therefore, I appreciate the gentleman's and understand his wanting to go in this direction, but we just cannot support this amendment. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas actually has 15 seconds remaining. I'm assuming you yield back as well.
The balance over time.
All time having been yielded, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Connecticut. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The opinion share, the noes have it.
Mr. Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Connecticut will be postponed. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 4, printed in the House Report 112-409. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 4, printed in House Report Number 112-409, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 572, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, and a member opposed, each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas.
Thank you to the chairman. Let me acknowledge, first of all, the combined efforts that has generated this approach to putting Americans back to work. Let me acknowledge the manager that is on the floor, Congresswoman Waters, for her enormous leadership on many of these issues, as well as the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Frank, who certainly has served and exercised his willingness to deal with questions of these markets. And, of course, my friend from Texas, who is managing this and is, again, I hope, working with us in a bipartisan way on some very serious matters. Again, let me emphasize that the most effective way to reduce our deficit is to put Americans back to work. And my amendment in this legislation deals with acknowledging that the emerging companies under this legislation provides for 5 years from the date of the EGC's initial public offering to also date an EGC has $1 billion in annual growth, and then the date of the EGC becomes a large accelerated filer, which is defined by the Securities and Exchange. A number of provisions to, in essence, help small businesses. This is an important principle. But my amendment adds a requirement that a company would not be considered an emerging growth company, an EGC, if it has issued more than $1 billion in non-convertible debt over the prior 3 years. Let me suggest that we are doing better than many of us might think. Many aspects of this bill, for example, will help community banks, which will help other small businesses. But if we look to the economy as we speak, the private sector unemployment has grown for 23 straight months. The economy has grown for 10 straight quarters. Overall business investment is going up. Corporate profits are up, as are investments in equipment and software, and exports have been a source of growth. But emerging growth, or small businesses, need the extra push, because when you think of the backbone of America, you think of small businesses. As a matter of fact, it is not uncommon for a company to be financed with debt as opposed to equity, and that while $1 billion is not what it used to be, it is still a pretty substantial sum of money. So what I'm saying is I want to help small businesses, but I also want to ensure that we do not expand this legislation where it is not actually helping those smaller emerging growth companies that truly are in need. For years, both Wall Street and big banks lacked the requisite government and oversight accountability, and I believe that it is important to ensure continued oversight, but a continued help for these particular companies. With that, I'd like to reserve my time and ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Gentlelady reserves. Gentleman from Texas, seek time in opposition.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I claim time in opposition.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
I'm not, frankly, certain that I'm in opposition to the gentlelady's amendment, and I appreciate her bringing it to the floor. If she would yield for a question, I'm just trying to understand the purpose of her amendment and what is the deficiency in the underlying bill that she seeks to address with this amendment would be that question. I would be happy to yield to the gentlelady.
I thank the gentleman. You're yielding for...
Yes, I'm just inquiring as to the perceived deficiency in the underlying bill that you seek to address with your amendment, and I would be happy to yield to my friend from Texas.
I like the concept of emerging growth, and I think the concept is to build these businesses up, to give them greater opportunities. And what I'm suggesting is that the amendment suggests that if you have issued more than $1 billion, you have grown sufficiently to have an additional standard or a different standard. This particular amendment suggests that we have a framework for emerging growth.
And I had one other question for the gentlelady. On the 3-year period, I'm just curious as to the thought or purpose behind that particular selection of a 3-year period, and I'd once again be happy to yield to my friend, the gentlelady from Texas.
I tell my good friend it is not 5 years. I thought that was an appropriate framework for $1 billion if you spread it out over a period of time. That's $300,000 to $400,000 a year. Let me just say that I think the concept is so important to my friend from Texas that a friendly modification would be welcomed in the time frame. But I think the $1 billion is an appropriate standard, if you will, for trying to ensure that we really do boost and give latitude to emerging growth companies.
I thank the gentlelady for her responses, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentlewoman from Texas.
Well, let me just conclude my remarks, and if I might, let me yield to the gentleman, because I did not hear him clearly. Let me yield to the gentleman from Texas for a question. I'd like to raise a question. I did not hear your support or opposition to this initiative.
Is the gentlelady yielding?
I'm hoping for a good bipartisan effort here, but I am yielding to the gentleman.
Yes, the gentlelady was very perceptive in her hearing. I was contemplating the answers that the gentlelady gave. At this time, I do not intend to oppose the amendment.
All right, the gentleman is very kind, so let me just say, as my leader on the floor was trying to get an inquiry about it, and let me, you always take a gift quickly and you say thank you. I think that this will add to the confidence of this legislation, and as I indicated, though this is not specifically to this point, I want to make sure that we're helping community banks provide more lending and access to small businesses, and I want to make sure that we, under the definition of this bill, help emerging growth companies as well be stronger and as well to be part of the creation of jobs, putting Americans back to work. With that, I ask my colleagues to support.
Gentleman from Texas.
Yield back to balance my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back. All time having been yielded back, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentlewoman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Thank you. It's now in order to consider amendment number 5, printed in House Report 112-409. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
I have amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in House Report number 112-409, offered by Mr. Ellison of Minnesota.
Pursuant to House Resolution 572, the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this amendment is very simple. We brought this up in the committee. I'd like the whole body to be able to get a chance to have this say on pay. Say on pay is a good common sense thing that empowers investors. It allows shareholders and companies to be able to say, you know, do I believe that the CEO pay in this company is too high? I have in my hand, and I'd like to submit for the purpose of this debate, an article entitled "A Rare Win for Say on Pay." And so companies are now exercising the right to approve or have a non-binding vote on pay. And as a matter of fact, Neighbors Industries announced that its former CEO agreed to waive a $100 million termination payment, and that was regarded as a rare win for shareholders. Now, this is a bill that I would like to support. I think it's a good idea. You know, the fact of the matter is, we actually, Mr. Chair, you'd be shocked to know, I think passed this bill out of our committee without any dissenting votes. But still, the issue remains. There's a lot of advantages to this bill. It relieves the emerging growth companies of the pretty hefty burden of complying with 404B of Sarbanes-Oxley. It allows them to escape obligations of providing a 3-year of audited financial statements. And these things, although I think they're good for our system and controls, are costly and do bring a toll. But you know what, Mr. Chair? Say on pay is not costly, it's not burdensome, and it empowers investors and makes them more engaged and gives them greater reason to be plugged into what the company is doing. And so I also have a letter I'd like to submit for the record too, and this letter is from the Council of Institutional Investors, and what they say is that they're concerned about the section because that would waive say on pay, because it would effectively limit shareholders' ability to have their voice, to voice their concerns about executive compensation packages. So, Mr. Chair, I have with me today members who have want to offer some remarks in support, and so for the moment, I'll reserve. How much time did I use up?
2.5 minutes. The gentleman has 2.5 minutes remaining.
Okay, so I'll reserve for now and allow the gentleman from Texas to weigh in.
Gentleman reserves. Who claims time in opposition?
I rise to claim time in opposition.
Gentleman
Mr.
from
Chairman.
Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, again, when we add in those who want full-time work and yet have part-time work, those who have given up and left the labor force, those who have been unemployed for weeks and months on end, we know that the true unemployment rate in America is regrettably close to 15.3%. Jobs is the #1 concern. Jobs and economic growth of the American people, it has to be our #1 concern as well. And as ever well-intentioned as the gentleman from Minnesota, his amendment is, it's not one particular regulatory burden. It is the cumulative impact of them all that is inhibiting job growth in America today. Anytime I talk to small business people in the 5th District of Texas that I have the honor and privilege of representing, this is what they tell me. Whether I'm talking to small business people or, frankly, Fortune 50 CEOs, it is the government red tape. Now, it doesn't mean all regulation is bad, but we have to look at the cumulative impact, particularly in the midst of what our constituents view as a crisis. John Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Whole Foods Market, quote, "In some cases, regulations have gone too far, and it really makes it difficult for small business. There's too much bureaucracy and red tape. Taxes on businesses are very high, so we're not creating the enabling conditions that allow businesses to get started." Again, on a bipartisan piece of legislation that is supported by the President of the United States, most of the provisions which have been overwhelmingly supported either on the House floor or on the Financial Services Committee, regrettably, the gentleman from Minnesota, his amendment takes a huge step backward and makes it more difficult for these emerging growth companies to get started. Now, I understand his particular concern on say on pay, but I would note that emerging growth companies still have to disclose their executive compensation arrangements to shareholders in their SEC filings, the same way that SEC requires for smaller reporting companies. And at what point do you think through how many votes do you want to compel shareholders to take, particularly on emerging growth companies? You know, we could require votes on patent filings. We could require votes on the retention of the accounting firm, maybe the acquisition of real estate. Perhaps shareholders should be compelled to vote to ratify any particular union contract. Maybe we should compel a vote on the IT system. And we can go to the ridiculous. Maybe we have to have shareholder votes to choose between Coke and Pepsi in the break room, whether or not the coffee is organically grown or not organically grown. What color is the company logo? At some point, it begs the question, are we here to stand up for shareholder value or somebody's subjective, personal values, which I respect, but can, again, harm emerging growth companies as they're trying to grow jobs and the economy? I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota.
I'd like to reserve 1 minute for the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Capuano.
Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the gentleman for yielding. This argument makes no sense to me. If we're interested in creating jobs, how does it hurt jobs by simply allowing the people who actually own the company, the shareholders, from having the ability to have a non-binding vote on the pay of their CEO? And by the way, if they chose to pay the CEO $1 gazillion, that's fine. It's their money. They can do what they want with it. If, however, they chose to cut the CEO's salary, maybe they could use some of that money to actually create more jobs. This amendment doesn't affect the creation of one job. It simply recognizes the fact that shareholders own the company. They should be able to decide how to spend their money. Some people have not liked this provision since it was adopted, and this is simply an opportunity to take a bite out of something they've never liked. It has no effect whatsoever on the creation of a job, and I would dare say to empower the shareholders might actually free up